Greetings from the garage. Mr. Ford and I, Mr. Henry Ford, here he is, and I were reading a Motor Trend from 1967. This is actually from March of 1967. Good friend of mine, Captain, who is a car collector, connoisseur if you will, brought in this magazine for me to read, and I just wanted to share some of the more interesting parts of it from 1967 that are even still relevant today. So for the video, I'm sitting here in my 72 LTD, and we're just gonna peruse the magazine and show you what they have here. The cover of it, we got a Firebird here and the Jeepster. We'll go inside and I'll show you some of the neat, very interesting parts of the magazine. The ads I found to be extremely interesting. Here's an ad for the Barracuda, 67 Barracuda by Plymouth, which is of course defunct now. It's pretty interesting. It talks about the 273 V8s all the way up to the 383. It's a pretty hot little car back in its day. Here's the table of contents here. I enjoyed this older version of Motor Trend. I used to read Motor Trend quite a bit, but anymore I'm sick and tired of reading all the foreign cars and stuff that just wasn't very interesting to me. I like the Detroit muscle cars, full-size cars, cars with frames, Broncos, things of that nature. This was an interesting portion here by the editor, and he discusses different keys to safe driving, and I thought the most interesting part of this was this line here where it says, "The key to traffic safety is the driver and the continuing education of him." And it goes on to talk about different safety ideas and features that the government's mandated. Even today, in 2012, drivers are horrible. They don't understand basic vehicle dynamics. They're texting, they're eating, putting on makeup. They don't pay any attention to the road and their surroundings. It's just ridiculous. So that was even a problem in 1967, and I'm not so sure it improved. The cars may be safer in some ways, but the drivers sure aren't any better. Here's a very interesting advertisement for it's actually for Autolite here, you'll see at the bottom, but it's got a picture of the Shelby Mustang GT 350, and it's interesting. It gives us specifications up here, and most interesting part right here, I don't know if it'll zoom in, the weight, 2723. The new Mustangs, I swear, are close to 3,700 pounds. It's incredible how light that car was. That had the 289, 306 horsepower with a 4-speed. It would have been a pretty fun car, but I was just flabbergasted when I saw the weight on that car versus the weight of the newer Mustangs. It's just incredible. Just incredible. They have some interesting letters in here to the editor and whatnot, and they talk about Corvairs, and that's an interesting article here. Gentleman writes in and says how easy a Corvair is and how safe it is to drive compared to what Ralph Nader would have you believe. So I find that fascinating. I've never driven one, but nevertheless, that's pretty interesting. They also, what else do they mention here? There's another cool advertisement here. AC spark plugs. It's just a neat advertisement. There's a Delco Ramey advertisement for an ignition system. That's pretty cool. Now this is a neat section here. It's called the Detroit Spotlight, and they talk about safety and upcoming technology. This, I'm not sure you can read it here. Detroit in uproar over safety standards. That's very interesting. The government has mandated 23 proposed standards, and it says that GM will only be able to comply for 1968 with 16 of these. Actually, Ford Motor Company went further by stating that some of the provisions in these proposed standards are arbitrary, unreasonable, and impractical. It sounds like the government nowadays. It's very interesting. I don't understand why the marketplace can't dictate what the manufacturers make. but the government, of course, has to have their hands in everything, regardless of supply and demand and, you know, the market. Here's an interesting part of it. For example, it will be required that a certain minimum area of windshield to the left of the driver must be cleared by the wiper. So they go on and they talk about this, and this didn't only affect the Detroit manufacturers. Volkswagen had a huge problem with this, with the Beetle, and actually it even goes on to hear and say that if some of these were to go into effect, Volkswagen might have to quit importing the Beetle, which is amazing. You know, they sold tons and tons of Beetles. Here's a neat thing you can see on the Mustang here. They call it the safety pod or the video pod, and it's a piece of steel that's about 12.5 inches above the top of the Mustang, and it shows, you can see the turn indicators and brake lights here, and the idea is so that vehicles behind it can see it from a further distance, and they act as if you can see it from about 7 cars back. So that's fascinating. I think it's impractical, but it's interesting, if nothing more. This was a very interesting article. I'm going to read the whole thing because I found it extremely interesting. Breakthrough in engine inspection reported by Buick. One of the biggest warranty bugaboos for any car maker is the release to the field of an oil burner. Previous random inspections of engines pulled from the assembly line for relatively extensive dynamometer test checks have not been too successful in spotting the chronic oil burner. Buick, however, will use a radioactive isotope called bromine 82, measuring the emissions to the exhaust of this just for 60 seconds after the routine 90-minute dynamometer check is sufficient to tell the tale. If a certain series registers positive, the problem can be corrected prior to the engines being installed in the cars, and air polluters are avoided. Very interesting. I've never heard of that before, but very interesting article. This was a very pertinent article to me, since the type of cars I like, for the most part, have frames under them as opposed to unibody construction. It says frames staging a comeback. Lincoln Continental, Fairlane, and Comet will switch from present unitized body construction to body-on-frame combination for the 68 models. Only Falcon will have a unit body among Ford Motor Company lines next year. Big Fords and Mercs are body frame. Thunderbird switched to body frame this year from unit body. Mustang and Cougar have platform-type construction, in which a platform, something like a door with 4 wheels, is the load-bearing member requiring no support from the upper structure. Reason for the move to body frame is primarily twofold. Easiest and cheapest way to assemble a car, and it is easier to achieve the quietness since it provides greater isolation and insulation of the running gear. Falcon probably will remain unibody since the design holds certain advantages for compact-sized cars. Mustang and Cougar will retain platform construction for some time. The concept is advantageous to specialty car application. I find that extremely interesting, since nowadays with the manufacturing, it has ceased. The Crown Victoria, what was that, in 2011? It's very interesting. That was about the last body-on-frame car you could buy that didn't cost a fortune. Of course, most trucks are, you know, F-150s and whatnot. That to me, it's just sad that method is being replaced. What else is interesting here? They also mentioned the Jeepsters down here, which I never knew had a Buick-based V6. I think that was a 231 cubic inch V6. May have been all aluminum. I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't really say here. But that's an interesting little vehicle. And then they talk about AMC rates an interesting thing. There are many buyers of automobiles whom high fashion is of no value. Buyers need reliable, low-cost vehicles that maintain their worth over a long period. We have filled this need in the past and have real plans to go even further to offer a unique full-size American car at a price that would compete effectively with subcompact imports. This is interesting. It talks about how AMC is trying to build this type of car with the government regulations, of course, hamper their ability to do so. So I think that's interesting, what we talked about before. This is pretty neat. It's called the Thunderbird Apollo, and in the back it actually has a full office back here. You can see a phone and a desk, so that's a pretty neat setup. Obviously I've never seen one. I always did like those Thunderbirds. The 4 doors were suicide doors, but 2 doors were better looking, and I think in '69 they had the Thunderjet in it. That, not sure what year that is there. That's probably a '67. That's very interesting there. We'll move on here, and this is interesting. You can subscribe for Motor Trend 10 issues for a mere $3.25. That's only 10 cents or 33 cents a copy. It's pretty tough to beat. I think in the time the newsstands Motor Trend sold for 50 cents, I believe. Let's see, what else do we have here that's fascinating. There's a neat advertisement for the 67 Chevelle there. It's pretty cool. Just everything about this magazine is incredible. The articles are interesting. The cars, I mean, it's wow, very interesting. This is a awesome ad, a Pontiac here, full-size Pontiac, and I'll read it to you. It's entitled Big Brother. It says, behind that appropriately ferocious split grille, there's a 428 cubic inch V8 that releases 360 horses as fast as you can add 2 and 2. Which is one good reason why Big Brother may well make you stone your present machine. It's very interesting. It goes on here and it talks about 400 cubic inch V8s, 376 horse, and all this. And it's just very interesting. At the very end, they had naturally the GM safety package, including the new energy or absorbing steering column, is standard. But why sit here reading this when you could be down at your Pontiac's dealer driving one? Big Brother is watching. Very interesting. Even the auto manufacturers were poking fun. That's just interesting. Very neat advertisement. Here's a very cool advertisement for the Jeepster. That is really cool. It's Danny Thomas there in the middle, and even this is the Kaiser Jeep Corporation. So this obviously predates, you know, Chrysler owning Jeep and AMC and so forth. This is back there. Pretty cool. Don't see too many Jeepsters anymore. See a lot more CJs and TJs and XJs and YJs and all that fun stuff, but not too many Jeepsters. This, though, has to be my favorite ad in the magazine. For the Mercury Cougar XR7, and they even have the cat in the back. The big old Cougar. Boy, that's cool. I don't care who you are. That is cool. It says at the bottom, Mercury, the man's car. Just arrived. European elegance comes to Cougar Country and Mercury's car of the year. Soft glove leather, walnut grain vinyl panels, dials you can read, overhead console,